Hey there, this is Jen T. Grace, founder of Publish Your Purpose and host of Purpose Beyond the Page. And I'm here today with someone that I've known for a very long time, and I'm very much looking forward to this conversation. So, Rhodes, thank you for joining me on this podcast.
Jen, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure chatting with you, especially in these times.
Yeah. And I know that, we were just happen to be emailing about things unrelated because you are, working on another book. And so you have a lot going on. So you already are a two-time author working on your third. So I feel like, we were just kind of like exchanging emails related to that. And then this kind of idea of leadership, identity, and the courage to be known kind of emerged from that very brief interaction. Because we are in some interesting times. And I think a lot of folks are feeling raw, vulnerable, uncertain how to show up, where to show up, and what that looks like. And so I'm looking forward to just seeing where this conversation takes us. But before we get into that, I would love to just kind of share a little about about yourself and what your background is.
Yeah, totally. So for folks that don't know me, my name is Rhodes. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm the founder of Rhodes Perry Consulting. We've been around for 10 years. This is my 10th anniversary for the business. And we basically help leaders imagine and then build cultures of belonging. And, what's different about where we're going with that work now is that so much of it is building this sense of belonging from the inside out, using somatics as a tool for transformation that happens through the body. So I'm excited by that, especially in the times that we're in, of really helping people find their ground. Especially when the next crisis hits, which it seems like something like that is happening every day. And and that's kind of led to the creation of this new book, which I'm excited to chat with you about.
Yeah. And, I feel like I know what somatic means, but I feel like not everyone might actually know what that means. So if you want to even just start with a little bit of clarity around kind of like what you mean, because the work is changing, as you said.
Oh, yeah. And that's like the most popular question that I get asked by clients that I work with now. So somatics, it's a Greek word. Soma means the body. And somatics is a holistic way of facilitating transformation through your tissues, through your body. So it's more than traditional modes of coaching tend to focus on mindset. They're cognitive. It's about right action in the workplace. And somatics is more about a way of being, right? So pressure's coming in, you get off center. How do you ground yourself to come back to what you're facing without reacting to the situation? And I think there's enough examples in our world right now where we see people in very powerful positions of leadership kind of reacting their way through life. And there's great consequences with that. And so this is an alternative of how to be more responsible with the usual and now these new pressures coming our way.
Yeah, I love that. And, if we're thinking about it, I would imagine that there's a strong connection between the somatic work and just reducing our, just the overload that our nervous system is kind of taking on. And is that part of kind of like how people can shift? Because like now our nervous system is in less of a reaction mode, more present.
Yeah. And I think sometimes, there's different modalities of how people approach and learn somatics. And so there's a kind of a group of practitioners that focus on somatic experiencing, and that's very much about nervous system regulation. And in the mode that I've been trained in, it's that and the idea of grounding yourself to be less reactionary, more responsive, so you have more capacity for choice. Like you're in choice with how you're showing up with what's coming your way, rather than lizard brain taking over and just kind of reacting. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, the lizard brain.
Yeah.
So the opening kind of like sentence that I, came up with for our like just a starting point for our conversation is, what does it take to share your story that challenges when that story challenges the norm of the rooms that you're in? So curious if we can unpack that a little bit, because I know that, there's so much to be said about visibility, vulnerability, showing up, being able to lead when all these things are kind of like topsy-turvy and twisted. And, your work, like you were saying, has always, very much been centered in the space of helping people feel like they belong. And just that idea of belonging is now under attack. And so, like, what are you seeing, I guess, right now in terms of, just thinking about like how to kind of show up in these rooms when maybe we're not even invited to be in the room?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so that's a big question, and I think it's when you first presented those opening lines, it just made me think about the book itself that I'm
Mhm,
writing, which is really different than the other 2 books that I've published with you
mhm,
on, which are just very much nonfiction business books, strategy, all operating from kind of the way of knowing how to do this work. So very
mhm,
much like consultant, I'm leading you through this work. And in the book that I'm writing now, it is more about, it's less about knowing and it's more about kind of learning about and knowing yourself. And the way that I create a bridge to that is that it's memoir. It's creative
mhm,
nonfiction. So it's part memoir, part methodology. And, there's visibility in the stories that we share. And as I'm going through this process, I just had advanced readers kind of scan and share their feedback. And the parts that they're just kind of moved by are the story pieces, which is not a surprise, right? Like
mhm,
stories really engage people. And then it's almost like if you tell a really good story, if there's facts or teaching points in there, it's like, yes, okay, fine, I'll take those. And
uh-huh,
I want more stories.
mhm,
And so, and the reason why I'm bringing this up in response to your question is because the stories that felt the most risky, although they've been processed, right? And so it's really very much writing from the scar and not the wound.
mhm,
Um, like it just, I was like, is this too much to share? And
mhm,
with the reader feedback, it's like, no, we actually want you to go deeper. We want you to go more into it. And so kind of my takeaway is that these are the stories that I think give other people courage, and
mhm,
not like bravery is like an impulse, it's an action. Like with courage, it's like to take an action despite being with like if fear is on your shoulder, you're still taking that action with fear being present. Um, and so that feels riskier for a lot of us, especially if we don't have safety,
mhm,
right? So if we're not safe in situations, especially in the workplace, I can imagine listeners being like, "Yeah, that's great. That's not gonna happen for me."
mhm.
And totally get that. Like, right now, for us to kind of, like, survive and to
Yeah.
live through these times, like, that's our number 1 assignment, especially if we hold a marginalized or multiple marginalized identities.
Mhm.
And for those of us with some degree of power, when you know that you're holding a position of power and you're not gonna lose your job, you're not gonna miss out on a promotion, how do you take that courageous act to disrupt, like you said, a narrative that might not otherwise be available in that room to be shared, right? It's like your
Mhm.
story that can really move people
Mhm.
and maybe inspire other people to, take these acts of courage, which we so desperately need.
Mhm.
And it does feel risky. So that's kind of where I was going with that. But kind of,
Yeah.
yeah.
I feel like there's so much to be said about, like, micro moments of visibility.
Mhm, mhm,
Like, I feel like I've always kind of thought that as whatever identity we
mhm,
are still representative of a community of a whole. So if I act ridiculous, inappropriate in some particular way, there
mhm,
could be people who are like, that is this type of person just doing the thing that I assume that everyone does, like very much kind of like stereotyping. And I
yeah,
feel like now it feels like that was always the case, right? Like, just, I remember when I used to do my LGBTQ consulting work way back in the day,
mhm,
which feels like forever ago at this point. But just thinking of, like, sometimes you just want to like get in and out of the grocery store quickly without having to like talk to somebody and have somebody like see your wedding ring and just assume that you're married to a man instead of a woman. Like the interaction and the exchange that creates, because it's exhausting. And
yes,
stuff like that happens. And yet it's that micro moment to either choose to correct the person, be like, "Oh no, it's actually a wife," or to just be like, "I just need to get the hell out of the store," and just kind of like move on without actually saying anything. And it
mhm,
feels like, and this was probably like 15 years ago that I was like teaching people. It feels so much more pressing and urgent now because there's no longer like that level of like safety. It almost feels like that option of like, do I say something? Do I not say something? I feel like for a lot of people, they're going to land in the I'm not saying something category because it just feels more dangerous now than before.
yeah.
So, where do you think that puts people that maybe are just in different areas of our country, for example, where maybe there is more potential for someone to actually like say the thing or advocate on behalf of somebody else or call out something that they see that they don't agree with versus the folks that are in areas where that was absolutely could not possibly even happen even if they wanted it to.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big question, and I mean, it's so situational, right?
Mhm,
Because I think even in areas that we would assume would be very unsafe, there's probably
mhm,
pockets where, I grew up in Florida. I do not live there now. And I go back and visit, right? And there's certainly places where people are visible and leading.
mhm,
There's LGBTQ people I'm thinking of who are running for office.
mhm,
Super inspired by those folks.
mhm,
And like I get what you're saying too. Um, and I think it kind of goes back to just individually like assessing the risk. And I think for folks who hold any kind of marginalized identity, I know as a trans person, like there's just moments where I know, and this is like a nervous system kind of response. I know when I'm safe, and I definitely know when like it just doesn't feel right
mhm,
to share more, to kind of lower my waterline, or
mhm.
to offer up something that's so precious to me that I just feel someone would just grab and step on and
Yeah.
push away. And I guess, like, for people that are listening, it's like we all wanna take some kind of action, right? Or maybe not
Mhm,
all of us, but I feel like you
mhm,
and I would imagine a good portion of your audience, is looking at the world and saying, "No, not this timeline," or "I'm actively building something that is different than what we're seeing kind of
mhm.
in what media we're getting access to." Um, and I think that that's yeah, I think that um, I think like we find each other and we try to share, like, when were moments that you were able to disrupt,
Mhm,
something that was problematic. What did you do? And really just trying to learn from people. I'd be
mhm,
curious, like, ways that you do that, and I'd be happy to share those in my own space. And I
mhm,
think the more that we offer what we're seeing, or being vulnerable enough to ask those questions of like, I really don't know what to do in this particular situation. How did
yeah,
you respond to that?
yeah,
Um, because it's more dynamic than like even checklist, or things that
mhm,
sometimes we see online of like 19 ways to respond to authoritarianism. It's like,
mhm,
okay, that's good to know. But what
yeah,
about this particular situation where I live, where I
yeah.
don't see any kind of like strategies to that?
Yeah. And I think it goes back to what you were saying before about story, like storytelling and choosing to put more story in your, your upcoming book because like that's the way that we create change is through
Mhm,
stories. And
mhm,
like if we look historically like back to cave like when people were drawing art in caves, it's
mhm,
like it's the stories that kind of carry through. And I think of, like we look at the world as this big situation that is occurring in a lot of different directions. And at the end of the day, the most important thing I think is feeling safety like in our own backyard. And
mm,
so how can we create those pieces of safety? And I think it's having neighbors and community members know who we are, which requires us to share stories.
oh,
So
yeah.
it's interesting to kind of think about there's the ways that we show up online and that curated persona that maybe is what's being put forth, but really I think the safety can come in the workplace,
Mhm.
in our community centers and whatever activities we might be showing up in. And I think just people being exposed to other people in different cultures and different communities and things like that, to me it feels like it's such a micro situation that has the potential to actually have a ripple effect in solving some of what's happening versus this giant macro issue that none of us really have any control over.
Absolutely. And I think, like, we've probably chatted about this before, but I used to work in DC, right? And so going to lobby different legislators on human rights issues, right? And it's like you have all the data. You have like the smartest people in the world crunching the numbers, showing the stats, right? And being prepared to share all of that, and then bringing actual stakeholders in, in my former job of working on behalf of LGBT human rights, right? And just a mom talking about the love of her child and connecting to that legislator, and it's a powerful story. And it's just that one story
Mhm,
that can move, someone who holds a degree of power, to take action, that it may
Mhm.
have taken like 10 years of just showing data, and
Mhm.
it's not as, it doesn't talk heart to heart,
Mhm.
and so the storytelling is really critical, and that kind of, I think the purposeful disclosure, is the big challenge, right? That I
Mhm.
think you're getting at, which is, here's a moment where, like, I'll share a story of purposeful disclosure. My dad, who has, evolved in his allyship, he's super ally now. He told me this story recently where he was working out at the gym and there was a guy next to him. And for context, for people who are listening, my dad is like 6'3". He's a very tall white man. Um, he's just as bald as me, maybe a little bit more. And this gentleman was like, there was a Fox News story about trans people. It wasn't great, and this man decides to say something really transphobic to my dad, and he's just like on this elliptical machine, and he turns to him and just very like in his own quiet power, he's like, you should be very careful about who you share your opinions with because I don't agree with you. And he just turns back and he's doing his thing. And this guy's like kind of shrinking down and he just walks away. And, you know, does that change his heart or his mind or his opinions? Probably not. But it may impact his behavior, right? In
Mhm.
terms of just
Mhm.
assuming that the world shares his opinions or people
Mhm.
who look like him share his opinions. And so that's just like a power of that purposeful disclosure. And in that moment, he didn't really disclose like, "Hey, I have a trans son." It's this,
Mhm.
he was able to say something that was like his style
Mhm.
of allyship. And
Mhm.
when he told me that story, I was like, "Dad, that's amazing," right?
Yeah.
And he just
Yeah.
took it for granted. And I'm like, "Oh, if more people were able just to do those little acts, right, it would be different world," right?
Yeah, because what he said wasn't anything, he didn't start a fight, he didn't disclose information about you, like, it was just so, like, neutral and also, like, just, like, stopped him in his tracks,
Yeah.
which is wonderful and a great way to be an ally. Like, allyship doesn't always mean that you have to be screaming about whatever the thing is or standing on a picket line or protesting or whatever some it's those micro moments. It's like that is a perfect example of those micro moments that I was saying. Like you said, maybe it won't change his ways, but maybe he'll encounter somebody else who does get in his face and say, really kind of, because there's definitely a time and place for that type of personality to show up.
Mhm.
That's not my style. I know that's not your style, but there's plenty of people who it is.
Yeah.
And maybe it's a combination of a series of these micro moments that
Mhm.
get somebody to be like, okay, maybe there is some reflection I need to do to figure out why it is that I feel this way, and or why am I attracting people who feel differently than me? Like, what's
Yeah.
the universe sending me signals about?
Oh, yeah. I like that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So, like, if we think about, I don't know, like our personal stories,
Mhm.
how do you see that showing up, like, in a workplace? Like, if we really think about, like, helping people feel like they're belonging and using these personal stories to help kind of create, like, a culture change internally, like, does that seem like it's a dangerous thing to be doing or dangerous conversation to be having given just what's happening here, at least in the US?
It could be. It could be, right? And I guess, like, it depends.
Mhm,
But I
mhm,
do think that when you have a trusted colleague, right, and you can go deeper to share, I think that those are transformative, right? I think of
mhm,
some of the most powerful relationships I've had in the workplace, usually fellow colleagues, like peers, where it's in between projects, you're at the water cooler,
mhm,
maybe an office gathering, social event, and you're just able to connect more, to learn more about what your colleague's family looks like and
mhm,
more about their childhood, history. And I think in those moments were the moments that I learned a lot about cultures and different people, similarly to my colleagues who learned a lot about trans stuff and queer stuff and
mhm,
growing up in Florida, like things like that. So I'm bringing that up because that could just be cathartic if you have it, and I
mhm,
recognize many of us don't.
mhm,
And part of how you build something like that is you take some degree of a risk,
mhm,
and I think that's, in the work that I do, and I know you're very familiar with this, with psychological safety, it's like when you have it, you know you can take interpersonal risk without fear of negative consequence.
Mhm.
And the big question mark for many of us is like, that's untested. You
Mm.
know, like I want to take this risk, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's going to compromise how people are going to view me. Um, Maybe like the views of my family, my
Mhm.
ambitions to advance. So there's real barriers to that. Um, and sometimes like when you do take the it's such a I mean, I guess that's the nature of risk, is
Mhm.
that when people do receive those parts of you that are so precious and that could deepen a relationship, you can go much further. You know, people are going to have your back. When they receive that with care, it's just like, it's just such a, it's
Mhm.
a, like you physically, you feel like a weight lifted off.
Mhm.
Um, and the real harm is when you believe that that person can hold the
Mhm.
things that are most precious, and
Mhm.
then um, they drop them, they smash them, you know, whatever the
Yeah.
metaphor is. Um, and then that can make us maybe possibly never do that again, like really
Mhm.
shut down.
Mhm.
Um, and I think in these moments, we have to really, I mean, that's why I love somatics so much, is like really trust what we're feeling. And if we're not
Mhm.
certain of like even being connected with our tissues, like
Mhm.
this is the time to really build that relationship.
Mhm.
One, because it's a great compass on these matters, and two, when you can feel that you're stirred, you know, there's techniques to bring you back to center so that again, you're not kind of reacting your way through your day,
Mhm.
which can erode any kind of interpersonal relationship, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems so powerful to have kind of like bringing in that somatic practice for
Mm,
pretty much anybody, especially if you're working in an environment where you just don't like you don't feel safe. There's no psychological safe, whatever the case may be. Because I would imagine if you have some kind of like practice that you can root yourself in, then when those moments kind of happen, it seems like it's a more like an easier way to kind of like just rein yourself back in from having some kind of emotional reaction that might have an adverse impact in the
mm,
moment, even though you're desperately trying not to have an emotional reaction and happens anyway. And you start to
right.
kind of like spiral because I can see that being the case. If I look back to like my first job that I is how I ended up in advocacy work to begin with, because I worked in a really homophobic work environment in an insurance
Mm,
company. And like I wish I had some kind of practice back then. Like I wish I
mhm,
could have like had like the like developed the intuition as well as it is now, where when I walked into that building, could have just the spidey sense could have picked up on like, oh, this is not a safe environment for me. But instead, I had to learn the hard way, as many
mm.
of us do. Um,
Yes.
so
Yes.
it seems like such a practice that like anybody benefits from, and I would
Mhm.
imagine even more so if you're kind of like holding a leadership position or maybe desire a leadership position, because I imagine it makes you an even more powerful leader when you're kind of leading in that like leading with that as your compass, if you will.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you can think about that with, like, leadership of just, you know, remembering maybe that well, maybe you don't wanna go back that far to the insurance company, but just, like, how leaders hold space when things don't go their way or the team's way or the organization's way.
Mhm,
And if they're dysregulated, right? If they're uncentered, if they're reacting, if they're berating someone, yelling, the
mhm,
entire that's contagious, right? That's really, really contagious, and it just creates it you know, it creates the opposite of what we're about, which is creating
mhm,
healthier cultures. And, right, like, I've been in moments like these, where, you know, I mean, we could just look at the news, right? Like, right now, I'm sure there's workplace teams as we speak that feel really dysregulated,
mhm,
right? And there could be the presence of a leader that just is doing the work of trying to stay grounded
mhm,
and to come in, not to bypass what people are feeling, but just to kind of reflect like, hey, there's a lot of big feelings here, right?
mhm,
And being able to hold that space of center, you know, our brains, like we have mirror neurons. So if I'm watching how you're kind of holding space and I'm feeling stirred, but I
mhm,
see you in a grounded place,
mhm.
like
Yeah.
there's some like co-regulation that
Mhm,
happens.
mhm,
And that's really, really important. And it's something that when I'm initially working with leadership teams, you know, that's what's not known, but to experience it and to see it in a group environment, it's like, oh, wow, I can feel that difference, like, and I can learn a skill on how to do this. Like, I can have my
Yeah.
own practice to get there, and it's like, I
Mhm.
feel like it's one of the superpowers we have to get through these times. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah.
And so going back to your book, so if somebody's listening to this conversation right now and they're like, "Oh, that sounds really interesting," like figure out how, because like in my mind, I'm thinking of like a lighthouse. Like as
Mm,
you're describing it, I feel
yeah,
like being a lighthouse in the room where people like there's an anchor point. They know that like the lighthouse is like a safe place.
mhm,
So with your book, so it's, it's narrative nonfiction, it's
mhm.
like part memoir. What is the, like the framework? Like what's part of that? So if someone's like, "Oh, that's really interesting. I want to learn more about how I can actually be this for someone else."
Yeah, yeah. So, the framework is it's kind of a four-part framework, and so the first piece of it is it's really well, one, it's helping leaders to navigate these times, right? To navigate these times, recognizing that the strategies that maybe they once relied on, just they're not working because we couldn't have predicted the moment that we're in, right? And what they might not know that's like their challenge is that um, to get through these times, like they may have to emerge as the leader that they've been waiting for or the leader that they know that they can be. But that fear of being real, that fear of being like your truest self
Mhm,
has held them back,
mhm,
right? And so the book really helps them clarify first, like, who is it within yourself that you know that you can be or that you wanna be, right? And
mhm,
really kind of naming that and clarifying that. So the whole first part, the first 3 chapters are really it's the first part is called Imagine, but
mhm,
it's getting that clarity of, like,
mhm,
you're obviously reading this book, you're signing up for transformation, which is
mhm,
not for the faint of heart, and that's really what somatics is. It's gonna, like, supercharge you becoming more of yourself. It's not becoming someone different, you
mhm,
know? The second part of the book is all about the practices that can help you notice, like, well, I don't know what I do when I'm under pressure. I just react, and I'm really frustrated with that.
mhm,
So it kind of slows things down, and you get to experience, body-based practices that really are a game changer. I've been doing this work for several years, and it's very, enlightening, but it's also a little it helps me deal with my shame wash of like, "Oh, I
mhm,
do that? I didn't know that I did that," right?
mhm,
And the work is not about shame. It's like kind of
mhm,
working with like, "Oh, right, I do that because it's kept me safe, or it's
mhm,
protect my sense of belonging, or
mhm,
it makes me feel a sense of dignity," right?
mhm,
Um, and I don't always have to do those things, right? So that's the practice piece. And then the third part of the book is really helping the readers recognize their transformation. And so the interesting way that it's been written is similar to if people have read The Artist Way.
mhm,
It's 12 weeks. So there's 12 chapters in this book, and it's not meant to be kind of read through page by page.
mhm,
You read a chapter a week and you get to practice, right? So there's integration. And by the time you get to the third part of the book in transformation, it's really allowing you to create almost like a somatic resume of,
mhm,
"Oh, like, I'm starting to see this change," right? Which can be really confronting, right? It's just it's part of this work that, it can be both confronting, it's very, um we just have to be patient with ourselves to go through it, and so that part of the book really holds people and where they're
mhm,
at, especially if they feel like, "Oh, I've been reading this for, 8, 9 weeks, and I'm not seeing this transformation," and
mhm,
that part of the book is designed to be like, "Oh, no, 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 you are, and here's
mhm,
how."
mhm,
Um, and then the last part of the book is all about leadership. So
mhm,
now that you have gained these skills and you've been practicing this for like 9 weeks, let's go into how this will actually impact you building a sense of team safety and trust,
mhm,
which are the foundations of belonging. How you can respond to conflict in a way that's not like, we're not gonna talk about it and just maintain artificial harmony, which is
mhm,
and we're not gonna move to that destructive conflict. Like, the leader will be able to hold any kind of friction to the
mhm,
point where dehumanization, destructive conflict is not gonna be an option, but that
mhm,
sweet spot of, like, what is generative conflict, and how can we navigate it with our bodies, right? Like, if we're not certain, if we've never seen this kind of disagreement on a team, going back to the fundamentals of the practices that you learn.
mhm.
So I'm excited by it all. So the sorry,
Yeah.
it's off on a tangent there.
No, that's the exact question I asked.
Yeah.
Can someone still read this even if the fourth part around the team and the leadership doesn't feel relevant to them?
Yes, yeah, anyone can read it, and those first 9 chapters are really, if you have a longing for just showing up more as your real self, or
Mhm,
trying to explore, like, who am I really? Like, what
mhm,
is the truth of who I am? Those
mhm,
first 9 chapters will really help facilitate you just kind of more unveiling. This is
mhm,
just another moment, it's another season of your life to
mhm,
show up more authentically, and, yeah, so and I guess I would just put it in the context, like, even for people who may not consider themselves a leader, those last 3 chapters of the book are really about how you navigate those interpersonal relationships that you have,
mhm.
right? So you might be a parent, you're leading your family, you might be a community member. There's ways that those last 3 chapters can be helpful too, and obviously it's written for workplace leaders.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. If we think about kind of like your work, like the evolution of your work. So
Mhm.
like you've been evolving as a person, as you said before, for the last few years on the somatic side of things.
Yeah.
What prompted you, I guess, to kind of like bring this into your actual work with clients? Because I can see like how it might be something that like someone would do and then just keep for themselves,
Mhm.
or someone does and like, oh my God, everybody has to know this. So I'm curious, like what the like if you'd had like an aha moment, or there was some interaction that you had, or just seems obvious, like what does that look like?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I went through, like, probably half, so I'm at the 10-year anniversary of my business, so at probably year 5, I burnt out. I burnt out, I was trying to do it all, and, in my recovery, I started to do somatics. I had a somatics coach, or still do, and that was transformative for myself, how I showed up in my own life, and how I approached my business, how I led that, and it was so much so, like, it shifted the culture of my work, which I find kind of funny because that's what I do for other people. And I was like, oh, this is the piece that I've been struggling with in the kind of change management work that I do inside of organizations, which is, I typically will work with, some kind of executive level leader that has a team that helps implement some of the strategies that we come up with, through the work that we do. Um, and in either the, like, team coaching or learning and development programs, the leaders that brought me in are often like, "Oh, no, 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 I'm okay, I'm good, I know all of this stuff." And it's
Mhm,
like,
mhm,
that was the missing piece, where it's like, this integration and carrying this great work forward will just not work without that deep connection and that shift in for that leader and
mhm.
potentially their peers to transform. So
Yeah.
that was kind of the aha that I had. And then just the beginning of last year, probably the end of 2024, I was like, "Oh, leaders are gonna need a lot of support where we're
Mhm,
going." And so I thought this was kind of a moment to
mhm,
try to bring in this body of work
mhm,
that is so transformative and share it with an audience that I think is way more receptive to this than maybe 10 years ago when I first started to work,
mhm.
in the spaces that I'm in now in my business. So that was kind of the evolution.
That's
Uh,
really cool.
yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah. And I feel like as you're saying it, I'm like, okay, then I'm like, I feel like I witnessed this timeline in a lot of ways too, as you were talking about it. I like, do you feel not to like just to distill down in a way that feels like very watered down, but like there's the woo side of the world, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like somatic work definitely leans, if there's a scale of no woo to woo, it leans toward woo, right? Do you feel like, I don't know if it's our society, it's our country, our like, does it feel like something is afoot in terms of like more people waking up in a spiritual way, in a woo way than ever before to you? Because I feel like I'm seeing it everywhere, but I'm like, am I in a bubble? I don't know.
Well, maybe I might be in the same bubble with you, though. Yes. And there's actually a story that I share in the book about, this was like 2012, and I got certified in Reiki, and I was a yoga teacher, and I was working, in a national advocacy organization where the woo was not very celebrated.
Mm-hmm.
And, taking that risk of sharing with my supervisor at the time of all of this extracurricular education I was doing, and she received that well, but it felt like such a risk to share that with her. And then at the beginning of this year, I made the commitment, in my own kind of emergence as a leader of just owning more of like adding Reiki into my work and adding techniques of yoga and meditation. And because I feel like the world, talk about woo, I had like a download that the world was kind of ready for this.
Mm-hmm.
And the more that I've been sharing this with my audience, the more people are hungry for it. They want more, right? And then, I'm translating it a bit of how, Reiki as like a Japanese healing and relaxation technique can actually help, reduce workplace stress and improve relationships and help with your presence.
Mm-hmm.
And people seem receptive to it. So I maybe, but then, I look at percentages of where people kind of are agreeing or disagreeing on hot topics in this country. And I'm like, well, maybe more people than 2012. And maybe
Mm-hmm.
that trend line continues, that people are more open, only in the sense that, like I said, with like writing this book of like one of the pain points of my audience is all of the old scripts, all of the old strategies, that
Mm-hmm.
everything I learned about being a leader is not working in this moment.
Yeah.
Right. And so people might perhaps be more open to like a new way of leading, which is just like being more, doing less, having more
Mm-hmm.
capacity for choice instead of just trying to kind of try to push through and have a plan for everything in situations that are just really unknown.
Yeah. Do you think it's tied into like hustle culture too? Like, is some piece of it where like you were saying how like you burned out. I think especially as entrepreneurs, I feel like there's always a moment where we just like, something happens where we just can't hold the weight of what we've built anymore.
Yeah.
And then need to kind of like self-reflect and kind of come back to it with a different sense of renewed, whatever the case may be. But I'm wondering, like, are people just now becoming more tired, or because the world, and I don't even think it matters where you land politically, like the world, this country, everything's on fire regardless of what your belief is.
Mhm.
Like, you believe that it's on fire for whatever particular reason. So it's not even, I think, a politics of like one side versus, I think everything is just a disaster. Do you think that that might have something to do with it too? Because people are just so burned out by like the constant bombardment of noise and opinions, and the sky is falling, and all of this of like fear mongering, and
Mm.
people just kind of like, I've had it. I don't even have like I don't even have it left to give, to pretend anymore, to be in this kind of what's the hamster wheel
Mhm.
cycle.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm just pontificating, if that's also kind of part of this too. People just don't have anything left to give.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a huge piece is exhaustion. I mean, the new term that I'm hearing, maybe this is old, but this like the quiet cracking, right? Which is like burnout 2.0 for very high functioning leaders that just are completely fatigued, have empathy fatigue, and
Mhm,
are kind of showing up, but just going through the motions, right?
mhm.
Because of that exhaustion.
Yeah.
And I think that paired with the erosion of trust in institutions that were
Mm,
once really, well, some people put a lot of trust in some of these institutions, that there's a lot of questions. And I think with those questions, people tend to turn to either something external, something greater than themselves, or kind of like internally really like trusting that intuition, like what
mhm,
we were talking about earlier.
mhm.
So that's what I mean, I guess like that's kind of where my theories are at right now. It's
Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it feels like the external and the internal are almost like a convergence of the two. Because
Mhm.
like if you're putting external faith into something, whether it's some kind of religion or spirituality, or you're internally focusing it into something that feels like woo from the outside, it's all still kind of the same idea, that you're seeking something that's going to bring comfort to a time that just there's not a lot of words to express what's happening. So
Yes.
so it feels like maybe because there is the like just this awakening that is happening and has been happening. It feels like it's been happening for years at this point. But it feels
Yeah.
like it's like not as taboo to talk about as it once was.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel similarly. I mean, the fact that I'm having these conversations in workplaces, where people are really open to it or open to learning more gives me
Mhm.
a lot of hope, and I think that that makes a lot of sense in what you just shared.
Mhm. I think about my book that just came out a couple of weeks ago, and, so
Yeah.
much of it I know, so exciting. I even
Yes, let's
It's
see
right
it.
here.
Yeah, I love it. I love the
So
cover.
beautiful. I happened to have pneumonia as it was launching, and I was sick for the entire month of February. It was not a fun experience launching a
Mm,
book, being so sick, but
mm,
it almost was like an example in real time for others to see, because the conversations I've been having with folks for, I would say, at least a couple of years, is very much like, slow down and do what works for you. Let's get out of this like bro culture, hustle culture, who screams the loudest gets the most, like all of that just gross noise of what marketing and social media looked like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, because it's not the same. It's not working the way it did before.
no way.
And so much of what I write about is like finding things that are aligned, find things that bring you joy, find things that will make you happy and the people you're trying to serve happy, because there is a way that that can all coexist. And if I think about, like, if I had wrote and published this book 10 years ago, people would have been like, what is she talking about? Like, how could I possibly be doing something that is so aligned and still producing results? Versus now, I feel like people are just burned out. It's the quiet cracking that you're saying. Like, they're just, especially authors who
Mhm.
are carrying the weight of the world with whatever topic it is that they're passionate about, whatever their purpose is. Like, that's a heavy weight to carry when there's just inputs flying in from every direction. And especially if you're writing about something that seems more taboo, more sensitive,
Mm.
then you're kind of adding to that too. So it's just interesting to think that I don't know that this book would have performed as well as it even is in the last couple of weeks 10 years ago or 15 years ago, because it's just so anti-marketing almost, in a way, where it's like you just got to do something that is aligned for you. It could be one single thing. Like, I don't even care what the thing is. Like, just find one thing that works for you and go with it, instead of all of this like, hey, pay me $25,000 to create a strategy for you. It's like, no, you don't even need it.
Mm.
So it's just so anti what I think everyone's talking about.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Like, I can't imagine. It's hard enough to put something out, like, let alone having pneumonia. And the fact that it's doing so well, that makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense because at least what I'm seeing, reading, experiencing, alignment is really key. That helps me definitely say yes to the things that feel really right,
Mhm.
in my body, and the things where it's like, "Okay, that's a possibility, but it doesn't feel right." So
Mhm.
alignment is really key, and I think the other piece, the other A word is the authenticity piece
Mhm.
where it's like, you know, like, I think Oscar Wilde was really smart and, like, "Be
Mhm.
yourself, everyone else is taken," especially
Mhm.
as AI makes everything
Mhm.
so hyper polished. And
Mhm.
I mean, it feels like going through, like, a really clean city with, like, no life in some
Mhm.
ways versus, like, the messiness and
Yeah.
the personality and, like, the energy that comes from, like, being able to connect with you. Like, there's
Mhm.
only like, this conversation can only happen with you and me because of who we are.
Mhm.
And I think we're gonna crave more of that as we get deeper into this very interesting boom of AI and whatever comes after that, or it's probably already
Yeah.
happening. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like AI is gonna destroy social media, and I'm all for it.
Yeah.
Like, I think that AI, 'cause, like, there's just kind of like this, what I'm noticing anyway, like this wave of people who are just unfollowing, unsubscribing to anybody or anything that has anything that is just AI generated. Because it's
Mhm.
like I could go to AI and ask the same question myself. Like, I'm following you because
Mm.
you can synthesize the information that I don't have to.
Yeah.
But if you're just gonna throw out some, poorly written chat GPT, then why am I following you in the first place? So I'm kind of like watching that happen.
Mhm.
And I think people are fatigued by social media too. So it'll be interesting to see like what social media 2.0, 3.0, I don't even know how many point ohs it is, but whatever that evolution looks like in the future. Because I think coming back and being in person and
Mhm.
having individual conversations and one-on-one, it feels like the pendulum has been swinging so far in the other direction for so long. Like, we knew it was a matter of time for it to start swinging back the other way, back to like humanity. And I think it started, or at least accelerated, during COVID when everything went online. And then
Yeah.
people just were like fatigued. Like I was already on Zoom for years prior to COVID, as were you. And so like that wasn't like a big culture shock for us, but like for a lot of other people, that was a
Mhm.
big shift.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
think it caused a lot of fatigue and a lot of burnout for people.
Yeah, I for sure. And it's so interesting, like, your predictions on social media because, like, I'm off of most. I don't kind of socially engage there, and I've just gone back to, like, my phone and
Mhm.
texting people and voice memos, and
Yep.
it's just been it has that has really filled my cup of, like, "Let's have an old-fashioned conversation on the phone." And I feel like my connections are deepening.
Mhm.
I mean, certainly, like, I don't know, however many thousands of followers or whatever to, like, just, like,
Mhm.
the 50 people or the 10 people that,
Doesn't matter.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
yeah.
It's exciting. Our mutual friend Bernadette, every year she sends me a singing happy birthday message.
Aw,
And it's like, and I took myself off social media last year, beginning of last year. So it's been well over a year at this point, and I don't miss it one bit. The
mhm,
only times I do miss it is if I'm hosting, like we do game nights, and a lot of times I'm hosting and I don't really know what's going on with my friend group because
yeah,
unless I'm directly texting them and they're, which I do have a lot of info, but like I miss like the highlights reel that is on social media. But it
mm,
also forces me to have to text people to see what's going on, like what are you up to? But I would rather have one singing Bernadette than
me too.
700 messages that are all the same, like pre-written happy
Yes,
birthday with the balloon or whatever it is.
yep,
Like that just it's so much more valuable than,
yes,
and I think that that's where I think the facade is really starting to crack on
mhm,
like how, and I think people are starting to wake up to see how controlled social media is and how it's like very much designed to put us in this very specific psychological state. I think people are starting to wake up to that too, which is I think exciting because it's like, all right, if we can start to see it, we can start to take actions that
mhm,
make us a little bit less dependent. And maybe, it'll take a little bit of time because I definitely had a few months where it was like not easy to not like want to feel compelled to do. And now I'm like, I don't even think about it.
yeah,
But it takes time, right? Like you can't just cold turkey things like this. You got to start to like see. And if it makes sense to you, like it's first a lot of people, it would never make sense to leave social media. And that's, it's everyone does their thing. But as long as it feels good, right? Like as long as there's some kind of joy being derived from whatever the activity is.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
This is always so good chatting with you.
I know.
I really
I feel
appreciate
like
it.
we could talk for days.
Yes. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
never a shortage of things. As we're
mm,
concluding, do you want to share? Because I know that like the book is like very very like in motion. But
yeah.
if you want to share any ways to contact you, get on a wait list or anything like that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the easiest way to get in touch is just rhodesperry.com. And if you want to stay connected to my work, just /subscribe and I will welcome you into my world.
Amazing, and you have a Substack as well that people can check out,
I
which I
do.
imagine is linked on your website somewhere as well.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. All of the places, like the website is kind of the centerpiece. So
Mhm.
check it out. And I'd love to chat, especially if you're into somatics or you're curious about the book. More on that. It's called Roads Less Traveled, not spelled like my name. And there's a story in the book about how that book got named. So,
Mm.
yeah.
Can't wait. Cannot wait. Thank you so much,
Mhm.
Rose. I so appreciate you. I'm so happy that you're in my life.
Likewise. Thank you, Jen. Thank you. Bye,
Thanks.
everyone.
Bye.